Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. This is your host, Will Carey. I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you are doing well. I hope you're ready for Thanksgiving. This time of year is always incredibly stressful, and this year, for me at least, I feel like I have many different plates that I'm spinning right now, and I am really just trying to keep them all. I know, and it's like I know some of them are going to hit the ground, but I am at least feeling like maybe I could get my foot under them to stop them from shattering on the ground, which is ironic because I did break a drinking glass tonight. So I'm practicing the art of compartmentalization. I'm trying to take things like very segmented, very bit by bit, and just kind of in more manageable chunks, you know. That's where I'm at right now. The constant juggling act that is this age range, this time of year. But I'm determined not to let it get me down or infringe my joy. That is my overarching goal, and one of my many joy. And I'm also looking forward to this time of year because my friend Paul Cohen will be returning to the show for his annual holiday appearance. So keep your ears out for that. But today on the show, another exciting repeat guest is Vinnie Fiorello, who many folks might remember from the last time he was on this podcast. We were talking about his new band, The Inevitables. And Vinny's back on the show today to talk about another big project that he is involved in and has been working on for the last few years. And that is, if you're the Punk Rock Museum, if you are at all interested in any kind of punk or alternative rock music in any way, I'm sure somewhere on your feed, the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas has come up. It is this just mammoth collection of punk rock history, and it is the brainchild of Fat Mike from NoFX, and Vinny was brought into the punk collective that are responsible for the conception and opening of this museum, which incidentally I haven't been to yet, but I cannot think of many other places that look like the most perfect place for me. Like, if there is a museum that is built with Will Carey in mind, it is the Punk Rock Museum. And Vinny and I are going to talk all about the conception of the museum, the process of securing the building and putting the museum together. We're going to talk about some of the features and exhibits that you can see if you were to go to Las Vegas and check out the Punk Rock Museum for yourself, including the most exciting thing that I've heard about, which is the Jam Room. So if you're a nerd for like guitars and music gear, like I am, especially when it comes to punk rock music, which is my absolute favorite kind of music, the kind of thing that really carries me, there is a lot to get excited about, and I'm very excited to talk to Vinny again about it. So if you enjoyed this, hey, if you enjoy this and then you go to the Punk Rock Museum and you enjoy your time there, I really want to know. I want to hear from you. So you can, of course, reach out to me at awesomedisaster.com. That's a great way to get in touch with me. Or I am on Instagram, willcarey23. And let's talk to Vinnie Fiorello, former drummer for Less Than Jake, current drummer for The Inevitables, and one of the members of the punk collective behind the Punk Rock Museum. It's good to see you again. It's been a couple of years, but when I was talking to your press person about setting this up, and I started thinking, oh, Vinny from the Punk Rock Museum. Vinny who? And then I put it together. I was like, oh, I know Vinny, of course.
We do.
Last time you here, I think we were talking about the newest Inevitables album.
You want to know? P.S. That's the next surprise singles next Friday with a record coming out in June for LP2.
Nice. Oh, very
Yeah.
very cool. I can't wait to listen to that. Thank you for that little a little preview. I'm very excited to talk to you again today because this project that you're involved in has been in my mind and in my all of my timelines for a while now. So I would love to, and of course I'm talking about the Punk Rock Museum, which is now opened in Las Vegas. Which congratulations on opening. I've been to a lot of museums in my life. I know that designing, curating, and opening a museum is a massive undertaking. So congrats to you and the rest of the collective.
It was most definitely a uphill climb without any climbing gear, right? So
Right.
none of us have that experience, but what we did have and do have uh, is the passion for punk rock music, right? And the want, and we see the need for uh, archiving it and being able to show the timeline and the history of punk rock music. So uh, in December 15th, it will be 3 years since it started. The voyage started.
Uh huh.
That's quite a climb, my friends.
Oh, absolutely. Because one does not just wake up and summit Everest on a whim. There is a planning phase. There's a training phase. There's a money phase. There's a base camp phase. There's a cry in the middle of the mountain when you run out of oxygen phase.
And then add a pandemic to supply shortages to a whole bunch of other things that go along with that period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it was wild because at a certain point you go, surely getting and curating museum that's tough, but then finding a building, purchasing a building, renovating said building during a pandemic. Woo!
I can only
Wow.
I can only imagine. My goodness. But from what I can see, like killer job. Like the exterior is slick as all get out. I would love to kind of trace the origins of this back, and then I want to get into the nitty gritty of this because I love that there's now a place that documents the history of this music. Because to me, as like when I was a young kid and I was like looking at all those cool black and white photos of like DC hardcore shows, that aesthetic, and I always wondered like, oh my god, what was it like being in that room at that time, and what was it like just being on that stage with all those like sweaty people, like all those videos of Rollins when he
Oh
was
yeah.
fronting Black Flag. So the idea that I've built up in my head, and I've talked to a few people in the general Fat Wreck, No Effects, Mike Orbit, like ancillaries. I've never talked to him personally, but I'm very curious what the conversation is like when he reaches out to you and is like, Vinny, I got this idea. What was that
Well,
moment like?
the phone call was, Vinny, I got this idea and I want to do the Vegas punk shop. And he knew that for Less Than Jake, my role in Less Than Jake was very much so a merchie, right? And
Uh-huh.
design eye and collectibles and things like that. So he said, I have this idea. It's the Vegas punk shop. Uh, so are you in? I go, dude, of course I'm in. Like that's a
Yeah.
given. He goes, okay, so give me a few days and I'll call you back. So he called me back and said, hey, uh, I talked to Lisa Brownlee, and she said, "Oh yeah, Vegas Punk Shop. We should add artifacts at the store." And he goes, "So remember the Vegas Punk Shop?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Forget that. It's the Punk Rock Museum, and we're gonna have like one of the best retail stores, and that's how we're gonna fit everything in." Because, are you
Mm-hmm.
still in? I go, absolutely. That's it's a given that I'm in, right?
Yeah.
And just poof, out of dust, Mike and Lisa talk, and all of a sudden we have a group of us that are on a Zoom talking about how this can happen and starting a business and getting all of the legal part taken care of. And right from this dust of an idea, uh, it started, and it started quick, right? And hey,
Right.
I could call this person. Hey, I know this person. I know these bands. We can totally pull it together, you know. So imagine, uh, 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 I'll just use first names, but Mike, Lisa, Jeb, Max, Gary, and myself. That was six of us that started to talk it through, and uh, then probably within inside the month we started to add Melanie Kay, which you spoke to,
Hmm.
who's our publicist, and then Mona, and go down, and I'm just using first names to make it a little bit more logical. But with that said, uh, we were a full house, you know, within the first like 3 months of being even an idea. We had so many people that were helping, you know, try to put
Hmm.
it together.
Yeah, I imagine it's like not too dissimilar to like the idea of those putting together like tours and routing and stuff. Like all those skills you get from being in a band all those years. Like you just kind of like what has to get done, how are we going to do it? Okay.
Yeah, and then you have to throw, you know, in that left turn and that curveball in there, going, no one has ever opened a museum. So
Right.
it's going with a, you know, completely blind, uh, and trying to figure out. You know that you have to have, you know, as a tour manager or a record label or a band dude or whoever, you know, you have to have a certain system in place to organize it all, and you have to have, you know, project sort of manage it even loosely. So you know, just from being in the business of being in business, right?
Right.
You know that you have to have some foundational stuff in place, and that's what we spent a lot on, and just calling and reaching out to contacts that we've known. And when you started to talk about, hey, it's punk rock museum, people are like, what are you talking about? You want me to give you my stuff, my prized possessions? You want my prized possessions? And some people were like, no way. And then other people were believers right out of the gate. Punk rock museum in Las Vegas?
Uh-huh.
Okay, just, you know, cool. Like I'll be a part of it. You know, I'll send and, or, you know, donate or loan my stuff to the museum. No problem.
That's awesome. I love that sort of like what that kind of spirit. I love that.
Some, you know what, we run into people, and some of them are, okay, you know, we're going to go, and it's going to be right now. Okay, yeah, I'm totally in. And then there's, you know, the other side of it where, very skeptical. Ah, you guys are never going to open a museum. You know, good idea, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And oh, it's here. You know, and I laugh. And when you start to see the building, we started to post the building, and we started to, you know, have, the construction workers in, and then some of those skeptics came around, but there still was more. Never going to open. It's crazy. And then all of a sudden, it was this big black building with these green letters that says the Punk Rock Museum across the front of it, and was like, "Hey, we're opening." And in true punk rock fashion, it was April Fool's Day that we opened.
Oh well, that's amazing timing. I wanted to ask, what do you think of the? How did Vegas come about as the location? I don't know if maybe Mike's ever mentioned this. I'm curious in your knowledge, like what kind of roots does punk have in Las Vegas? Because I feel like
Well,
most people think Vegas like the Strip and big
yeah, but
shows.
here's the thing: we weren't looking for like a rooted place. We were looking for a place that was neutral, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and and even Vegas has a great, history of punk rock, right? But not like London or L.A. or New York or San Francisco.
Right.
Uh, but some people are like, why Las Vegas? Just like, you know, you said. I go, well, if we were going to put that museum in L.A., we couldn't afford to have 12,000 square feet of a museum in Los Angeles.
Right.
We
You'd have a
sure
closet.
There's no way that we could do that in New York City. So Vegas makes sense in a few ways. it's a hub for tourists. The whole sort of infrastructure of Las Vegas is about tourism. It's cheaper hotels.
Right.
It's mass transit to get around the city. It's there. It has a constant flow of people coming there for business
Mm-hmm.
and for just vacation. Just to be in the city. So, what better place to have something based on tourism and tourists, even though they're punk tourists, and it's in Las Vegas. It makes total sense. The economics behind the building itself,
Mm-hmm.
the economics behind being able to afford to get there, and then just it being a hub of tourism. It makes total sense.
Yeah, now that you laid it out like that, it absolutely makes sense. And I feel like it's in a ways it's the phrase four corners kept popping up. Like I feel like everybody eventually makes their way to Vegas. So when you lay it out like that, it makes total sense to me. Um
If you put it in DC, or you put it in New York, or you put it in LA or London, then people be like, oh, I really don't like London punk, so I'm not going to go to the museum. I really don't like New York punk or New York hardcore, so I don't think I'm going to go to that. And being in Vegas, it's better to me that it's a blank slate. Oh, Vegas, why? It's not. Oh, I don't. I'm from LA, so I don't like New York. I'm from New York, so I don't like the UK. Uh, Vegas to me was always a very neutral and cool and weird and awesome place
mhm.
for the punk rock museum to be. And when you consider also some of our allies that are also museums in Las Vegas, the Mob Museum,
Uh-huh.
the Atomic Museum, the Neon Museum, Paradox Museum. Uh, they're all are very interesting and a little bit left of center. So why not have the Punk Rock Museum be sandwiched amongst all of those very cool and very righteous museums that exist there?
Most assuredly, like a kind of a center of non-typical kind of museums, like not another kind of like natural history of civilization kind of museum, like interesting kind of like unique places. That neon museum in Vegas is
It's super cool.
is super cool.
But before it was an actual museum, and it used to be called the Neon Graveyard.
Uh-huh.
And I used to when I visited Vegas, I would go and sneak over the fence and take a bunch of pictures and all that stuff, and be a hoodlum. But back then it was super cool, and now that it's the Neon Museum, it's ultra cool, especially at night. If you ever have a chance to go there at dusk, and at nighttime
Mm-hmm.
where everything's lit up, it's awesome.
So rad. So when the museum kind of starts to really materialize, what I'm most interested in, and I kind of want to track this through like your lens of a merch guy, when you were starting to build like the exhibit and like the experience of someone visiting, what was essential for you in terms of someone's experience as they went through the museum? What
Well,
had to be there?
I'll go two things real quick. We were lucky enough to have Brian Ray Turcott, who is sort of the curator of the museum. He did uh, a lot of books like Fucked Up and Photocopied, Punk Shirts, and things like that. And if you're not familiar with him, you should check him out. He's awesome, right?
Uh-huh.
Uh, so we were lucky to have Brian. He has an amazing collection of punk rock collectibles and artifacts that's in them that he lent us. But with that said, to answer your question, I'm going in a roundabout way. For me personally, and for the collective, as we spoke, we decided that we wanted a timeline. Here's the beginning of punk rock, or what we perceived as the beginning of punk rock, and
Mm-hmm.
then we wanted to go the timeline. It was uh, date first, location second. So it started. We locked in on early 70s New York City as the birthplace of punk rock, right? You
Yeah.
could argue proto punk in different places that ahead of that, right?
Yeah, like
But
Stooges, that kind of
yeah, yeah.
era. Yeah.
But we said, okay, New York City, early 70s. And then we knew that, okay, we wanted early 70s in the UK. We wanted early 80s in LA. We wanted early 80s in New York. We wanted, and we knew what we wanted. And we were lucky enough that the building that we bought, it used to be like a, I don't know how to describe, like an antiques mall,
Oh,
right?
yeah, kind of like
Where
a big
I,
open air flea market thing.
but it wasn't open air. It was this like crazy maze of hallways that if I had 100 antiques I wanted to sell, I could rent a vestibule from these people and I could put my
Sure.
stuff in there. So you'd walk around and the people would have their little section of antiques and you'd go through.
Hmm.
We very much took that sort of idea of when you're in the museum, that bottom floor is very much it's like a maze. Even now I get lost in it. I'm like, well, okay, if I have to get over to here, I have to go this way. I have to actually think about it because it is hallways that are kind of dotted in this sort of larger area. Uh, but very much so, the antique mall allowed us to kind of clean that up and be able to lay it out in the timeline.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Like you have this big enough space where you can kind of like map out your the path, the like physical path
Yeah,
and the
and then
experience.
in comes Brian Ray Turcott after we sort of landed on that, and he brought the idea of the system, right, and the system is uh, metal backing uh, metal back cases, and we're using super strong magnets to to hang up artifacts and to be able to support the artifacts. So if you're walking through the museum, realize that everything is held up by magnets, like the little tiny ones, big ones with
Uh huh.
hooks, everything. So that way, it's ever evolving. We can move it 2 inches this way. We can move it a foot this way. We can add something, take away something. So very much so that it because of the system, it very much made the museum still now and will continue to be this way, a living museum.
Right.
Adding so if you came in April 1st to the museum when it opened, and then you went in now, it's very much so different. The same experience, but different pockets and different things added and taken away and rearranged.
Yeah, absolutely. Like every good museum will have like a special collection or like an exhibit that comes through. Like you have that like ability to sort of like customize and like continue to change it, which I think is really cool because the punk the history of it is going to continue to evolve and be different. And I feel like probably a few years there's going to be an entire section of like the revival that's been happening right now with all of the rappers making pop punk right now.
Yeah.
I could totally see like it being like a continuously expanding sort of thing. Like it's not set in stone. It's an ever evolving history because the music is still around.
100%. It's a living museum, right? So punk rock's not over, right? If you talk to like a salty like 50-year-old dude and he's like punk rock stopped in the 80s, and but
Sure, sure.
that's not what it is. Even though it may have a bit more metal tinge to it, or you pulling from different genres like rap or folk or like an international vibe to it, whether it's adding sort of an Irish influence into it or whatever. Punk rock story continues. It just morphs and continues to splinter into finer pieces, than it used to be. Like when you would say, if you were in the 80s and said, oh, punk rock, you would right here go, I know what that sounds like. That
Yes.
sounds like Minor Threat, or that sounds like Black Flag, or the Circle Jerks, depending on where you were at. Uh, in the 2000s, it started to splinter even more. So you go punk rock, and if you lived in Chicago, maybe punk rock would be,
The
in the
Lawrence Arms.
2000s, Lawrence Arms, right, and or even Fall Out Boy, right, and
Yeah.
start to discuss a little bit more outside of the common sort of collective idea of what punk rock is. In the 2000s, it's much more splintered, and even splinters of splinters. And it's cool if when you go upstairs, uh, we have bands like the Linda Lindas and Scowl,
hmm
but next to bands like Pierce the Veil or Einstein Kills. And there might be some people that are like, Einstein Kills, they were out on tour with Metallica and they have this thing. But those guys still got in a van and they still slugged it out too, no matter what. And they still, their roots are definitely in punk rock scene. So it's great to welcome all styles that started as punk or have the punk rock ethic or ethos to it still. So cool.
Yeah, exactly. Keep maintaining that ethos is
and
so
and and, and
vital.
the line continues to go. So who knows what it's going to be 5 years from now? But
hmm
uh, the lineage of punks continues to grow.
Absolutely. One thing I would love to ask, and I'm not, there's a couple of like punk, like sort of things that I've always been curious about the origin of. I don't know if you're able to ascertain this during this. So, during like the research phase, um, did you ever trace like, I'm guessing this maybe was more the UK, the like leather jacket with spikes. Do you know that started? Because I came along too late to for that to know where that
You
started.
know what? I don't know where the point of where someone said I'm going to put spikes on a leather jacket, but I do know that in the UK you had the sex shop, right, where
Mm-hmm.
that's Sex Pistols and Malcolm McLaren. Like it started that scene gravitated around that store, and that store was very much so fashion forward and started to line up the look of what a punker, that uniform of ununiform, right?
Yeah.
While I don't know exactly where the inception point of studs on a leather jacket, I do know that fashion heavy UK punks early on, and that store in particular was a ground zero for a lot of the way that punk rock dressed, and then reverberated outside of London.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense to me because like Malcolm, and especially with like Malcolm McLaren's influence, like the that sort of like vibe and thought, I feel like can't be underestimated in terms of like the disseminating that look, because now that look kind of became ubiquitous. If you ask like any random person what's punk, they'll probably point to someone that dresses like that.
100%, right? So I think that if I were to bet on it, it would be out of that scene, and then as it, the waves of influence came out of that. People always put their spin on it when it hits, New York City or hits Chicago or hits LA.
Yeah. I think about it in a similar way to like food, like when like you'll have one type of cuisine and then it'll get filtered through a different sort of food tradition. Like everyone puts their own kind of like little localized spin on it. Same way like different flavors of ska, like that it originally comes from like the islands as kind of protest music, and then when it gets through to Florida, it gets that sort of punk edge to it, and uh, it's all uniquely weird and beautiful in its own way.
You know what? And not to spend too much time on it, but a finer point of that is that prior to it being an immediate sort of outtake intake thing of the internet,
Mm-hmm.
it had a lot more time to marinate and really like uh, hone a specific feel. So Chicago, there was a specific thing. In Florida, there was a specific thing. In LA, a specific thing of punk rock genres, right?
Yeah,
And very much so a tribalism was there to look and feel the music, sound of the music, everything. But and that immediate sort of dissemination of information via social media or the web. Now there's not a lot of time to marinate. Someone in Tokyo could be dressing like this. Someone in Chicago could see that at the same time. And some people think that that's much cooler. I like the taking a little bit more time to really get an individualized locale and have that like sort of you could tell a San Francisco punker because of X. You could tell a New York punker because of Y. DC
sure.
punker because of Z. I really like that, and obviously there's always common, a lot of common thread, but there was always that little thing to it.
I absolutely do. I went and actually saw I went to a punk show last week, and this band was playing. It was like maybe like at a place called Gold Sounds in Brooklyn, maybe like 30, 40 people there. And one of the bands was called Moonraker, and I was listening to them, and I thought they sound like they're from California, and they're from LA. So I was like, uh I still got the ear. So I know exactly what you mean. Like this sounds like driving in traffic in the beach and tacos compared to like New York where we're all like cold and cramped together.
There's no doubt about it, right? So I think that there's something special inside and outside and around punk rock music, right? And
Yes.
there's people very passionate about I love it because of this, or it started here, or ended here, or this is the band that did, and so many opinions, so passionate about those opinions, and it's great to be able to put it all into one spot for people to kind of go, oh, I agree with this, oh, I disagree with this, oh, they did this really well, oh, I wish there was more of X, you know.
Absolutely. And then you can have the conflict resolution mosh pit where everyone works out their differences and then hugs it out after.
Well, hopefully that would be the case. You never know.
um in building the collection, was there any sort of particular artifact that you got in, or whether from like a friend or someone or a band you like that came in where you're like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm seeing this? Did you have any
There's a
uh
lot of those moments.
what was like one that really stands out to you of like, holy shit, I can't believe this is here?
Tim Armstrong's guitar from Operation I.
His Gretsch?
It's actually not the Gretsch, because but we do have the Rancid Gretsch that's there as well, right?
Wow.
But the Operation Ivy guitar, I forget what it is at the spacing at the moment, but to
Uh-huh.
see that guitar, wrote songs off of it for Energy and Beyond. Well, for the EP and then Energy, uh, it's amazing.
That
It's amazing.
is
It's amazing. Billy Joe's Blue, one of them anyway, is at the museum. That's another guitar. That's great. Recently, Green Day's Bookmobile that they did their early tours in.
I
That's
saw
at the
that.
museum. So those are some holy shit moments. Seeing Joe Strummer's guitar too. Hung up,
Yeah.
you start to trip out a little bit on it. Seeing handwritten lyrics from Joe Strummer, it's also amazing. Uh, Alex Pardee, who's an artist, but he did some work for The Used, a lot of like cover art. But there's stage prop of like one of the monsters. Uh, there's a ton of cool stuff when you start to kind of file through. There's a ton of holy shit moments. I can't believe that we have that, and I expect there to be more always.
My fingers are already tingling at the prospect of Billy Joe and Tim Armstrong guitars in that museum. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
it's crazy. The coolest thing that if you're talking about the pyramid of cool things at the museum, for me, it's the jam room. So you can go in, play Fat Mike's bass. You can play uh, Fletcher from Pennywise's guitar through the amp that he recorded, a whole bunch of records on. You could Joan Jett's guitar, uh, Eugene from Gogo Bordello's acoustic. There's Wesley Willis's keyboard that you could play that's in there. There's the Wasted Youth guitar that's through the Wasted Youth amp, and it sounds like the record. And uh, that room, when you go in there and have the ability to take down the left-handed Gretsch of Tim Armstrong and be able to sort of play through it, you should see the faces on some people. It's like, oh my god, I can't believe that this happened. Or Mike from MXPX, you hear Chick Magnet, people like picking it up and playing the songs that were originally, written on those instruments. It's super cool, man. And like uh, the other sort of very cool, unique thing is the Pennywise Jam Room, which is a Fletcher took out everything out of the jam room of Pennywise and carted it to Las Vegas and set it up and recreated the Pennywise practice space inside the museum. And that's become a sort of de facto hub for when bands kind of come through, they'll be able to jump on the instruments and play 3 or 4 songs. It's super cool, man. Like seeing some people be like, "Oh, that's cool," and then all of a sudden, "Oh shit, that the Casualties just started playing. Like it's right here," and they do a short set. Or Sum 41 just did that during When We Were Young festival. They came in afterwards and did an impromptu like short set. Mike did some singing with them and everything like that. So it's cool.
Yeah, I saw that Sum 41 video. I was just like, oh, to be in that room. That sounds so rad. And like especially like I'm sure there's other musicians that would probably listen to this and be like, to me, that would be the equivalent of like, I don't know, playing like Hank Williams guitar at like the Grand Ole Opry, or like some like looking upon like an ancient artifact, like an artifact from Egypt. Like all these songs, like when you're describing that Pennywise jam room, I just started like that Fuck Authority started playing in my head. That
Yeah,
is
it's wild, man. And when Mike he was in a meeting and said, "We're going to get instruments from musicians and we're going to put them in the room and we're going to have people play," and I was like, "No way anyone's going to be okay with that." Like
right.
it just, hey, just rage on my guitar, like just strangers rage on it. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, musicians were into it, man. And a whole bunch of people went, "Oh yeah, definitely. Here's my guitar. You can do it." It's Zach from Rise Against, watching him sort of in that jam room, and I did some footage for social media where he was just talking about that particular guitar and that journey that he had with it, and then it's there for a fan of Rise Against, or maybe not even a fan of Rise Against, to uh, jump in and sit down and play that guitar, and it's awesome to see that idea on the other side of the execution of it is much radder than I could ever had imagined.
Yeah, that to me, in addition to just this beautifully like laid out museum, that to me is reason enough. Like people should just be flooding into this museum to have that experience, because there's just something to being surrounded by the tools that were made to make this thing that you've enjoyed. Like to touch that Operation Ivy guitar is like, oh, this is what Unity was written on. Like, holy shit!
Yeah, man. Like
Get a little of
there's
that magic in my fingers.
there's definitely magic in there, man. There's definitely, when you walk through, you start to see it's more, the museum is more than like a 17-year-old kid's room, right? That
Mm-hmm.
sort of, I was that like an altar to punk rock. Here's flyers and articles ripped out and posters and record covers on the wall. It's more than that. It's not just some random, hey, we're going to throw a bunch of a firma on the wall and whatever that is.
Yeah.
It's a curated, it is a curated collection of punk rock artifacts, and it's ever growing, and that's a very cool thing, man. And like, there's magic, and you go in, you start to like check it out, and you start to go, oh, like Johnny Thunders and guitar, or you start to, oh, there's CJ Ramon bass, and there's, you start to uh, like sort of pick out the things that are sort of calling to you, whether it be, I'm a visual art person. So seeing some things, cover art or spray painted t-shirts or whatever it is,
Yeah.
there's specific things that I start to connect with inside that building. It's cool.
That's this sounds so awesome, Vinny. A couple other things I'd love to ask you about, like the creation of the museum, because the other cool thing that I love about this place is that like you have people in bands giving tours of the museum as an option. I think that's an amazing idea, and you've given tours at the museum as well, right?
I did one.
I wanted to ask you what was that experience like for you, getting preparing and then like
I was
doing like,
scared.
yeah.
Well, I it was the first time that I was a tour guide. Number one, number two, I didn't really prepare much just because I had been around from the inception of the museum all the way through to uh, that current state of when I did it, which was just a month, month and a change ago. So uh, I didn't do much preparing, but I also past the point of being in a band, I don't do much public speaking as well, right?
Right.
So to be around 20 something people and it being the first tour that I gave, I was nervous, but I had a blast, and that nervousness sort of shook out after maybe 20 steps into
Uh-huh.
the museum. And I think people just want that, with tour guides specifically for the museum, when they show up, they want the tour guide side of the experience of being a punker, and hear stories and hear how they made it through, XYZ or whatever. So I tried to provide that experience during that time. And mind you, it's that when I got upstairs in the 2000s, that's where I could actually talk. Oh, I did, Feel by Ramen, and I did,
Mm-hmm.
I crested a wave of a specific type of music that became popular music,
Yeah,
from
yeah.
punk rock scene. And it was much more in tune with who I am and my experiences once I got up to that second floor. But where I fell in love with punk rock, that was, in the early 80s. So
Right.
I still had some things to talk about all through that.
Exactly. Like you could speak from your own personal experience for a good swath of that time. And
And
then
I think that's what people, if you're showing up for a tour, a guided tour from a punk rocker, you want that hey, this is my life, and I'm going to tell you about some stories that happened in my world of punk rock.
mhm. If you as a patron of your own museum could pick your own ultimate tour guide to take you through the museum, who would that person be?
Whew. Let me. I'll go. I'll choose two people. Uh, Tim Armstrong.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear Tim's point of view on a lot of that from the 80s all the way up to now.
Mm-hmm.
I would also let me see. I would say that Fletcher from Pennywise would be probably a favorite of mine because
Uh-huh.
He's such a has amazing stories and amazing folklore that surrounds him, right?
Yeah.
That I would love to hear every story that he had. Like, oh, this is the time that I snuck into this place. This is the time that I had a fake hand grenade. This is the time that I did XYZ. I would love to walk the museum with Fletcher and as a tour guide and hear every story that he has attached to some of the people that are in that museum.
Absolutely, because like Pennywise, and I think in particular, it's just one of those bands that have like really almost like a tank battalion that have really made it through like the the absolute trenches from like the highest of heights through a lot of different eras and have been maintained again the ethos to kind of bring back to that, like they've never had any sort of wavering on that at all.
For me, it's a they're one of maybe four or five bands that are the foundation of California punk rock.
100%. I totally agree with that. Um, one other thing I'd love to ask you is you've got a new like temporary exhibit coming up at the museum, right? I think I saw on the website.
There's a few actually. There's Black Punk Now that opened during and around when we were young. We're having the opening party December 15th. Uh, and James Spooner had curated that temporary exhibit. Uh, we're having Brian Walsby art show that happens at the top of December. Brian did 7 seconds, Chemical People, go down the line. He did a lot of art for bands throughout the years. Amazing artist, uh, and uh, we do have currently the photography of Ricky Ercoli up. And then I think that I had heard another photographer will be taking his spot at the top of the year. That's going to be awesome.
That is so cool. I've got to get out to Vegas to see this, man, because this sounds like everything I've ever wanted to
Wild.
experience and more. Where can people go if they want to get more info about the museum?
More info, they could go to thepunkrockmuseum.com. They can go to our Instagram, which is the Punk Rock Museum, and Facebook is / the Punk Rock Museum as well. Uh, and yeah, I mean that's the best spot for kind of doing a deep dive.
Fantastic. Well, Vinny, it has been a pleasure to get to chat with you again on my show. I think I said the last time that uh, Les and Jake meant a lot to me growing up, and so to talk to you about this project again and hear how awesome it is. If I'm ever out in Vegas, we'll have to jam in the jam room.
Please do. That'd be awesome, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vinny. I really appreciate it.
Cheers.
That is Vinnie Fiorello of Les and Jake, the Inevitables, fueled by Ramen Records, and now the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas. Make sure you check it out if you're planning a trip to Vegas. See a vital part of a collection of the history of punk rock music from the past to the present and to the future, and get your hands on some punk rock guitars from the bands that made all of that great music. So thank you, Vinny, again for being on the show. Thank you to Melanie Kay for helping set this interview up. I always relish the chance to get to chat to folks whose art has meant so much to my life over the years, and this was certainly one of those occasions. And I cannot wait to check out this museum at my next trip to Vegas. So, folks, if you enjoyed this and you go to the Punk Rock Museum, you can let me know what your experience was like. You can go to awesomedisaster.com. That also has links to everywhere you can get the show, including Apple, Amazon Music, and Spotify. If you want to give us a rating and a follow and boost us in the almighty algorithm, I would appreciate it. You can follow me on Instagram at willcarey23. I'm also on TikTok at comicwillcarey. And if you want to go a little bit further, further in support of the show, you can go to our merch store as well as our Patreon, which are also at awesomedisaster.com. And may your Thanksgiving be as stress-free and delicious as possible. I hope you get the good jellied cranberry sauce, and you also get some good on the stove cranberry sauce. I'm partial to the jellied kind because that's what I grew up with, so I'll probably find some over the course of the Thanksgiving week, and then I will tune in with you guys afterwards. We can do a holiday post-mortem on our way to into the Hanukkah and Christmas season. So, folks, thank you all again so much for being here, and I will see you next time between awesome and disaster. Stay safe, get vaxxed, get boosted, and stop out fascism. Take care, everybody.